automatically turn off transcription. Every single recording of these is me whining about transcription in the first minute or so, which I always cut out if you watch recordings. Right, you should all see the mural board. Is that correct? Does everyone have the link? It's not a very interactive one today. It's a lot more of me giving you updates. But I've put some spaces in where we can be a little bit interactive. So I hope that's okay. So first off, we're going to do an icebreaker. We'll go around the room as we always do. Name, pronoun, where you're from, local authority, software provider you work for, what you do. And I'm going to I decided to go for favourite type of bus because I figured you'd all give me, some of you would give me very geeky, very detailed things, and other people would be like, I like a double-decker. So, and then we'll go through the plan for today. We're going to be doing a lot on A+NaPTAN and just giving you some updates on that. And then I've got an actual AMA. I couldn't think of everything you'd want to know, so I've actually made a little corner for Ask Me Anything. And then we'll have the usual feedback corner as well. And this should take a little bit under 2 hours, so I hope it's going to be a fun ride. I also need to get up my list of people. So for those who don't know, I'm Dr. J. I use they as a pronoun. I'm the service designer, business analyst, hand wavy type service owner for NaPTAN. I'm here on behalf of DFT. Bibi, could you manage the people coming in for me? Thank you so much. Favourite type of bus? I'm going to say the classic double-decker, but I really like the new classic double-decker that you're getting in London now, which has got electric signage, which is a lot brighter, and you can see it from a little bit further away and pick out which bus of the 3 or 4 coming towards you, because that's the first world problem, is which bus of the 3 or 4 coming towards you is the one that you want to catch. I realise that's a problem probably only Londoners have. So I'm going to go down the list in alphabetical order. So Andy, you're the next one up.
Right. Hi, I'm Andy. I am a data development manager for National PTI. I'm a he, him. I'm not, unlike many of you other people on the call, I'm not from a bus background. I'm from a data background. So my favourite bus is an old diesel open top.
Excellent. I love it. That's one of the double deckers with the open top version. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. The next person down is Bethany. Hello.
Hello everyone, my name is Beth. I am a transport planner, customer success at Polaris, the software provider. I am a she, her, and I'm going to go off what Dr. J said, and I do enjoy the double-decker buses, particularly the old ones with the stairs at the back that you see around London. It's always fun going down those stairs when the bus is moving. Nice to meet everyone.
Fantastic. Wonderful to have you here. Thank you, Beth.
Okay.
The next person is Bibi.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bibi. I am a policy advisor, also one of the product managers for NaPTAN. My pronouns are she, her. And like Bethany, I do like the double-decker old-fashioned buses where you can get off at the back. But my favourite is a tour bus because you get to see fantastic things wherever you are.
Brilliant, thank you. Diane, you're the next one up.
Hi, I'm Diane. I'm she, her. I'm the public transport surveyor for Fife Council, so that's me. So I've just got a new role where I'm doing sort of more like computer-based work, so that's why I'm now joining in on all these things. And my best bus, I would say a triaxle, because that's like one of my better ones for driving. So yeah.
You've driven buses?
Yes. Yes.
Brilliant.
I used to be a driver, yeah.
Excellent. Doug, you're the next one up.
I've been the transport policy manager at Royal Borough of Windsor Maidenhead. So he, him. I will go with. I'm going to age myself a little bit. So when I was little, every bus was a Laser National. So that would be my favourite. Sitting on one of the sideways seats and hanging on for dear life because they'd always rush along with the doors wide open, about a metre in front of me. Great fun.
Excellent. Safety was always the highest concern back in the 70s and 80s.
Exactly.
Iona, you're the next one up, and I'm sorry, I know that I've probably said your name slightly wrong, and I've got to run to the door. BB, I'll let you continue.
Please do continue, Iona.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Iona. I'm a bus development officer for Strathclyde Partnership for Transport, which is Greater Glasgow area. I'm going to go for a coach because I think it's the only kind of comfortable bus travel you get.
That's true. Thank you very much. Jay's the next person, so we'll skip them. Jonathan?
Hi there, I'm Jonathan Bigwood, pronouns he, him. I am Senior Public Transport Officer at Central Bedfordshire Council. I also look after NaPTAN and travel line data for our neighbours at Bedford and Luton boroughs. I'm sure Dr. J was relying on me for something detailed, so I'll go for a very specific type of bus. It was the London Transport's RT type, which was the type before Route Masters happened, built in the late 40s, early 50s. So I grew up in a part of London that had quite a lot of them on the roads until 1978.
Jonathan, you never disappoint me. Thanks, BB, for looking after that. It's always the way. Justin, you're the next person up.
Okay, Justin Bloom from Bix Technology. Favourite type of bus? I'm not sure I've got one, if I'm honest. I'm sorry to disappoint there.
Not disappointing at all. I didn't catch your pronouns.
Him.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So the next person up is Keelan.
Hello, I'm Keelan, pronouns he, him. I work for a company called Q Routes. We do route planning for home to school transport. So NaPTAN is somewhat on the periphery of what we do, but I'm particularly interested in accessibility information because a lot of the home to school transport we plan is for kids with needs that might be physical or indeed other kinds of special educational needs and disabilities. So this is interesting stuff for me. Favorite type of bus? I'm not sure this is a type of bus, and I was actually struggling to find a picture here, but I live in Dublin, and I spotted an unusual thing, which was a bus with a luggage compartment was kind of at the back and raised up above the ground, which the driver was able to like open and close without leaving the cab, and people were able to get their luggage in and out. And they seem to be being used on routes that have a lot of luggage that people are transporting on them, but they're not really coaches, and they're not like airport buses. Anyway, I thought that was pretty cool.
That does sound pretty cool. I would look forward to an image of that, and also when we do know what's going on with school stops, Keelan, you will be somebody that we grab and have a really good chat with, because I think you're going to be really helpful to us there.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm just going to go. So we've got 3 more people. Just a reminder for those who've joined, what we're going to do is we're just going through the icebreaker. So you're doing name, pronoun, where you're from, software company, local authority, and your favourite type of bus. So the next person, if we've done Keelan, the next person is Lynn.
Hi everyone, I'm Lynn. I'm from Transport for West Midlands. I'm a data officer. And last year on a visit to London, they had very nice, shiny, curvy red double-deckers, which I liked.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Lynn. And which pronouns do you prefer?
She, her.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Rebecca, you're the next one up. Oh, sound has a problem. I will be off and then back on. Okay, cool. Rebecca's just going to rejoin. We'll find out about Rebecca, our mystery person, later. Thomas, you're the last one up.
Hiya, Tom Carter, pronoun he, him. I work for Transport for Greater Manchester. And favourite type of bus, I actually live in Sheffield. In Sheffield, we used to have what we call bendy buses, where they sort of like they turn a corner. You'd have to Google it to have a look, but they were fun to use in the 80s and 90s.
I think I know the ones. We used to have them in London, and they used to be on one of the bus routes that I used to catch frequently, which ended in a 3 and was always known as the free, because if you hopped on at the back, unless you were caught, you didn't have to swipe your card. Not that I did that, and I would deny anything of that. Rebecca, hopefully you can hear us now. We can see that you've gone off mute, but we can't hear you yet. No, I'll leave you to sort it out, and we'll continue on if that's okay. Just throw me a thumbs up in the React if that's good for you, Rebecca. You all know. Brilliant. If you don't know, up the top there's a little React, and if you mouse over it, it'll throw up things like a thumbs up and a heart and claps and stuff like this. So feel free to use those to let me know whether you want me to continue and things like that. Right. I will put that off to one side. I'll put the chat up so I can see what's going on, and then we will run through the plan for today. So we're going to do very quick housekeeping. Then we're going to do a deep dive into A+NaPTAN. I'm going to give a background of it. I know some of you have seen this a number of times. I've delivered it so many times, I'm trying to remember who I've delivered it to. And then I'm going to get into a whole pile of questions that we're answering. Like, how do we know it's really there? How are we building our pipeline? How do you train an AI? Which has been an interesting learning curve. What is the plan? What are we doing around a plan? And then there's a question section. So if you think of something and you want to throw it in the mural, feel free, and we'll get to those questions when we get there, or just note them down on a piece of paper. Either is fine. And then we've got a usual feedback section. There's just a quick little bit of staying in contact with us. We've got a YouTube channel. You can go and watch it on high speed, which is one way of getting through a lot of 2-hour meetings. You can follow us on Eventbrite, which is how you find out about all the meetings. You can sign up for the newsletter, which also acts. We use that whenever we have an outage as well. It's like a list of everyone who's interested in NaPTAN. And you can also now access all the documentation about NaPTAN from the website. We're starting to consolidate all of the bits that are around various parts of the government estate into the one space. That's a little bit of an ongoing project with me and BB. So, A+NaPTAN, or accessibility in NaPTAN. First off, what problem are we trying to solve? Let's just ensure that we're all on the same page when it comes to the problem. So we've got 2 passengers. We've got Beryl and Brenda. They both live in Bristol. They both want to go see their friend Beverly, who lives in Birmingham. Beryl has no accessibility needs. Brenda is in an electric wheelchair. The current situation is Beryl can use a travel planner, and she can plan a multi-operator, multimodal, multi-LA journey. Super easy. There's a couple of national travel planners. I'm just going to mention one, Travel Line, where she can go and plan her journey. She gets all of the information that she needs in the one place, and she has agency and autonomy over her travel plans. There'll be a couple of different routes shown. She can decide which way she wants to go and what cost it's going to be. Totally fine. Brenda also wants to make the same journey. She cannot plan her journey in one place currently because she needs to check with every operator, mode and local authority to find the accessibility information she needs to plan her journey. She can't gather all of the information she needs to have agency and autonomy over her travel plans. So there are 3 outcomes. 1, she travels and has a really bad time. 2, she decides not to use public transport, and then we fail on 2 of the measures that the government is using. 1 is that she drives a private vehicle and we miss out on the CO2 goal because public transport, CO2 goodness. Or she decides not to travel and we miss out on a disability social inclusion goal because we want as many people as possible to be able to partake in society. So why is Brenda not able to do this? So a little bit of history for those who are newish to NaPTAN. And this is a very potted history. In the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, NaPTAN was created, which took all of these silos of information from local authorities and joined them together into one database of what is where for all public transport. And NaPTAN stops I've said here, described in a consistent format. consistent is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, but it's a mostly consistent format around how we describe a stop, with everything having a unique identifier. It's got names, we know where it is, we know what type of stop it is. All of those things are part of the data set. Brenda is unable to view the accessibility information because the data she needs is in silos everywhere. It's in silos from the operators, from the different modes of transport, and different local authorities. If she's able to view these, she needs to go and visit all these different sites. And in many cases, the data exists, but it's not visible to members of the public. It's not in any digestible way for anyone to see it. So what is the outcome we are trying to create? And this sounds so basic and simple. We want Brenda to plan a journey using a travel planner. She's able to view the accessibility information in the travel planner, and the information is consistent between modes, operators, and local authorities. So if something says it's going to be accessible to somebody in a wheelchair, we know exactly what that means. There's not variations of step free. There's not variations of this is accessible, but it's not really, or it's accessible only for this type and not for this type. We want to make that really clear. I see Doug nodding. I see people nodding. This is stuff everyone's happy with. Cool. Life is good. So, one of the big questions around the approach that we're taking is, why are we focusing on bus stops? Because there's two ends that you can approach accessibility on. The first one, and I call it the King Cross St Pancras problem. King's Cross St Pancras is a ginormous station. It's got something like, I think it's 12 platforms. No, it's more than 12 platforms. It's 12 platforms in one of the stations, and 10 plus 2 more, plus 4 more in the other station, I think, plus some tubes, plus all of this, plus buses. It's just a ginormous, complicated station. A lot of people start looking at accessibility at that end. We made the choice to look at accessibility at almost the reverse end and go and look at bus stops, because they're 97% of the NaPTAN data set. They cover the first and last mile of any journey. So most people, unless you're lucky enough to live like right next door to a rail station, you generally have to catch a bus to get to your rail stations, or your train, or your metro stations, or your airports and things like that. And there are many areas of the country where the bus is really the only transport available. So we've also done some work on personas. So we're building our personas based on interviews with users. We're looking at the CEN and the Atkins work that was done, the audit of all the rail stations that was done by Atkins, and we're working to be compatible with those and also adapt them for the context that we're looking at, which is about how do I travel in that very, very specific way. We decided to begin with wheelchair users because bus operators within their trans exchange will put in whether or not the bus is accessible, whether the bus has the ability to drop a ramp and has a wheelchair space. That's one of the requirements for a lot of people's trans exchange. So we know they're accessible buses driving around, but we don't know if where they stop, somebody can hop on or off the bus. And just filling in that little piece of information is going to unlock a lot of ability for people to plan travel and to think about traveling. So we've got 3 private beta personas that we're playing with. We've got our key one, who is Brenda, who's in an electric wheelchair. We're using an electric wheelchair for all of the mobility pieces at the moment, basically because they are the most sensitive to gaps and to slopes. So it sounds counterintuitive, but electric wheelchairs, because of their weight, are slightly more sensitive to bumps, to small steps, gaps, and the steepness of ramps. So if the ramp's too steep, an electric wheelchair will struggle to get up it. If the gap is too big, an electric wheelchair will struggle to get over it because of the way that their wheels work. And if a step's too high, an electric wheelchair, people can't just rock back and lift up their front wheels and jump a small step, which I've seen a lot of manual wheelchair users do, especially the very, very active ones. You can't do that with an electric wheelchair. So we're looking at kind of the hardest version for mobility at the start, or the one with the most constraints. We're also looking at visually impaired people who are visually impaired who have access needs based around being able to see what's going on. We've got Gary, who uses a white cane, and Glenda, who has an assistance dog. So we're currently focusing on somebody who uses a white cane because there are more people who use canes than there are who use assistance dogs. So we're focusing on quite a large number of users when we talk about visual accessibility. And then we're going to have a look at the other two as variations of those two big ones around mobility and visual accessibility. Does this make sense to everyone? Is everyone kind of comfortable with the way that we've described that? We're also trying to use a social model of disability. So we're talking about what somebody needs to be able to progress in society and to take part in society, not the limitations, not focusing on the limitations that they have. So there's a medicalized model of disability which focuses on the limitations and puts the stress on the disabled person or the person with the access needs trying to partake in society. We're saying it's society's fault that somebody can't partake in society, and that's kind of the social model in a very broad brush. There are fine details around that, and this is a lot around how we will talk about it. So if we appear to do little circumlocutions in language, that's because we're trying to use the social model and talk about accessibility in a very social model way. So we've got this, we're going to focus on buses. Now, some of you will say, in the early 2010s and in 2016, there was an entire data set created for the Olympics and then refined for the Commonwealth Games, which covered the 40 to 50% of the country. Why don't you start with that? So we sat down and we took that seriously and had a really good look at it. And this is called the Olympic data set because we just reached the point of, if we called it the Olympic one, it just made sense of what it was all about. And because it focused a lot on London and it focused on all of the places where the Olympic villages and any of the Olympic venues outside of London were as well. So it was kind of focused on particular areas. But it was created with a different model of accessibility. It used the medicalized model of accessibility. It had limited fields, and the way a stop was assessed was hard to understand. And I'm going to just show an example. And both of the stops shown were recorded as marked, a physical bus stop, and active in use in NaPTAN. In the Olympic data set, both were considered wheelchair equals true. Now, I'm sure, and I'll zoom in ever so slightly for people, I'm sure it's kind of obvious that one is and one isn't. And so we tried to have a look to see why this could be, and if we could sort this out, and if we could unpick this and use the data in there as like a starter for 10. And what we uncovered is no, there just wasn't any way of unpicking this data. It was too messy, too complicated, and how stops had been assigned wheelchair true wasn't clear. There were slight differences, and we just could never be certain. So we said, okay, that's fine. We'll start and we'll build a new data set. So we are currently creating or finding a way to create the new Olympic data set, which is a baseline set of data for all bus stops in NaPTAN. Now, there's 400,000 bus stops in NaPTAN. The largest other place that I can find that's done something similar is like a metropolitan area within the US. I think Boston's one of the largest ones, and they have about 1,000 to 1,500 bus stops, and they talk about this is a big achievement and this is hard. I know that there are more bus stops in London and in Manchester than that number, and I know that across the country there's a whole pile of us to look at. So we wanted to look at how on earth you could do this for 400,000 stops. That's a really, really big problem to solve. This is not a trivial problem. So we started off with, okay, how do we do this? And because you can't just go and look at them. If I wanted 148 local authorities to go out and look at 400,000 bus stops, that's a ginormous investment of money. and we would then have to figure out how you looked at it, what information you told us. Some of you would take ages to do it. Some of you would be able to do it very quickly because you've already got the information. There's a real variation everywhere. So we thought, okay, let's try this new AI thing and see if that will work. So first off, can AI tell if a bus stop is accessible or not? Can it give us accessibility information? Short answer is no. That was really quick, really fun. We tried a couple of your generic like ChatGPTs and some of the other models that were out at the time, and we just asked them, look at this bus stop, look at this bus stop, look at this bus stop, tell us if you think they're accessible, tell us what's going on. They just can't. So we were like, okay, so general large language models, not a goer. But there's a model called visual. There are AI eyeballs. I'm going to call them AI eyeballs. It's not quite the right term for them, but they're basically able to look at stuff and tell you what it's seeing in a couple of different ways. So we were like, okay, if we wanted to use those, how do we do this? So we built a plan. So first off, we did, and I'm going to call this a hand crank. We went through and we used humans as AI eyeballs. We basically said, how can I describe what I'm seeing in a way that we can turn around and put this in programmatically? So we started off, but we had two hypotheses. So our first hypothesis was that trunk stops are more accessible than branch stops. So essentially the stops that have a lot of traffic running through them, however you measure traffic, have a lot of people running through them, are going to probably have more investment, are probably going to have more infrastructure, so therefore are probably going to be more accessible. So we played on those probables and went, okay, so can we tell the difference between a trunk and a branch within people's networks? And can we tell the difference in accessibility between those two types of stops? Now, we're only looking at marked active stops. And I'll pause for a second. So we're looking at marked active stops because if it's inactive, ain't nobody stopping there. So that's one. If it's marked, it's somewhere physically on the street that is going to be in the same place. If it's a hail and ride or a flexible or a custom stop, they are literally this side of the road, and we don't tend to put infrastructure on those three types of stops. There are some marked hail and rides, but they're incredibly rare, and they're just marked, the area will have markings on lampposts and things like that. But generally, if you're a marked active stop, there's something physically there to tell you it's a bus stop. Does that make sense to everybody? And does that fit with how everybody kind of thinks of bus stops within their local authorities and that? I'm seeing some thumbs up. I'm seeing some nods. I'll continue. Brilliant. So we went through all the marked active stops for a local authority. We then went to TransExchange and said, tell me, for this local authority, all of the stops that get lots of buses and all the stops that don't get many buses, or how many buses run through each stop in a 24-hour period. And using that, we were able to get a histogram to tell us, here's all the stops that have lots of buses, here's all the stops that have few buses, and then we chose only the top stops to look at, and we created some ways within the team of telling where that breakpoint was between these are the branches and these are the trunks, these are the branches. And it differs for each local authority. One of the things that we had a little question of, is it the number of buses or the number of routes that lead to this? We were lucky it is the number of buses, which made some of the maths and some of the bringing stuff through quite easily, and quite easy to tell, because there's some that don't have many routes running through them, but they have a high frequency bus that runs through, we actually had to go and do some rigorous testing to kind of tell which way round we should look at this. We then went and took those stops. We had a population to look at of our high frequency stops, and we then said we're going to go and look at a sample of those. So depending on the size, we chose a sample number. usually around 10%, but it varied. Some of them we went slightly more, some of them we went slightly less, because it depended on how much we could differentiate and how easily we could see it. So when I opened the Google form, we then went through a lovely Google form that the team built. This is a copy of it. We put in the ATCO code, you choose the date you captured. We added some bus stop. So we took screenshots of the bus stop so that we could confirm what we had seen. We made sure that we knew what date it was captured by Google. Sometimes if a bus is in the way at a bus stop, you have to go back a couple of years or a couple of versions to actually see the bus stop. And that was also a really good check on another hypothesis that we had, which was once you've built a bus stop, you don't tend to break the bus stop down. You do tend to keep the bus. If you put a bus stop in, it does tend to stay a bus stop. I know in Scotland at the moment you might have had a few blow over, but for the most part, once you've built a bus stop, it doesn't tend to go away. We then have a look at the surface of the road, whether it's permanent, like concrete, asphalt, paving, or whether it's soft, like grass, sand, etc., stones, gravel. We also had a look at if there's any tactile paving at the bus stop, and what type of tactile paving it is. There is a language behind tactile paving. It does vary in each local authority. London seems to have a slightly different variation to some of the other places around the country. And I'm sure Manchester also has its own variation. The big urban metropolis areas tend to have a slightly different tactile paving regime to other places. Is there a controlled crossing nearby? What type of controlled crossing? Is there a curb? Now, we've called it a curb cut. We've been told that this should actually be called a drop curb. I called it a curb cut because that's an Americanized term that I'd picked up, not realizing it was an Americanized term. So this is actually a drop curb. We also have the curb type because a lot of the drop curbs have tactile paving on them. And then we have curb height. We have a high, standard, and low or no curb. So there's 3 types of curbs that we see when we look at it. And the low no curb is the one where there really isn't anything. It's basically straight down onto the ground, and it's going to be very, very difficult for a bus to drop a ramp. And if it does drop a ramp, it's going to be too steep for many electric wheelchairs. It's going to have to be either a ridiculously long ramp or it's just going to end up slightly too steep. And then we also take a look at other street furniture. We can see whether there's real-time digital information, whether we can see a timetable, whether we can see a shelter, a cycle lane. Now, we are looking for cycle lanes that are between the bus stop and your continuing journey. So the bus stop is like a floating bus stop. With a cycle lane, you've got to cross the cycle lane to get to the footpath. Those are the ones that we wanted to highlight, not to say they're inaccessible, just to alert somebody of, by the way, you've got to cross the cycle lane. Footway width, is there enough space to get a wheelchair off? There's a couple of places that I know in London where if you tried to drop a ramp and take a wheelchair off, you would basically face plant straight into a hedge because the footway is not that wide. Even if the curb height is beautiful and all of that, the footway is barely 1 person wide. So we're looking at that. Is it a clear way? Because that makes a lot around people being able to find it. Is there advertising? So this may seem weird to ask in terms of accessibility. What we uncovered, trunk routes have people. People have eyeballs. Advertisers like eyeballs on people. Therefore, a lot of your trunk routes have advertising hoardings on the bus shelters. So we can use that to verify that we're looking at our trunk routes and not our branch routes. You don't tend to put advertising hoardings on your infrequently used stops. You tend to only put them on your frequently used stops. So this is kind of one of those nice little pieces that we collected together. Your bus pole and flag and your road markings or your bus cage. And then there was an area for notes. So we went through and using human eyeballs, we went through and we did a whole pile of work. And from that, using our human eyeballs, we were able to build an inference model which allowed us to take the street furniture and infer accessibility for different users and our different personas. So we said, for example, a hard surface and a medium or a high curb equals mobility wheelchair. This is a very, very high level, very blunt version at the moment. So we can say for a mobility user, you can have mobility wheelchair true. We've assessed the street furniture and we can see hard surface and a curb. Mobility wheelchair false. We've looked at the street furniture and we can say that we don't see all of the infrastructure you need to use that stop. And null, we don't got nothing. We don't know about the stop. The stop is one of the stops that's in our branches. It's a stop that we've got no information for. Does that whole piece make sense to everybody of what we did? And then we can take this information and give it to our data consumers who can then give it to passengers. So you can take this information about the stop and then you can present it up to Brenda in her journey planner, and she will be able to see that this stop, of the 3 stops that she might use, this stop is true, this stop is false, and this stop is null. She can therefore make an informed choice as to which stop to try in the first instance. And we can then refine it. And one of the things we want to look at is how we refine, how we display this to passengers, and how we refine giving people that confidence. So with that, we had humans looking at the stops. The second part, we proved our hypothesis about trunk stops with the data that we got. So now we're getting AI eyeballs to look at the street furniture at stops. So we're using our MVP and data sets from local authorities that people sent us, because a lot of them included images of the bus stops, and we used that, we labeled it up, and we started to work through taking all of that information and putting it through various AI algorithms to try to see if it could see the street furniture. And then we put it through our inference engine and then we deliver it off. So all we're doing is just changing that one step. Everything else stays the same. So how do we know if it's really there? So from our first run of AI eyeballs having a look at things, we're able to get some pretty decent results for some things and not so good results for others. And we're just this is one of the things that is really tricky to try to train everything. So first bit of caveats, if you try to do your AI eyeballs on London, it's really, really easy because London has a standardized bus stop there's lots of them. The only places that aren't in the same the very few bus stops that are in a different orientation. There's a couple that are reversed. There's some that are different in Camden. Camden has its own style of bus stop that's slightly different to other London boroughs. And currently the Croydon doesn't have any bus stops at its bus shelters at its bus stops. So we're able to use all these different things. London, you can train on London almost so easily. For the rest of the country, it's a lot trickier. And I'm going to talk through this, and I'm sorry it's not the clearest. I need to get a version without all the different labelings. But what we've got is this one here is kind of a London style stop. It's open, it's on two sides with a roof, it's open to the road, there's a bit of a seat, it's kind of your standard long side, short side to the street. Here we've got one with its back to the street, and instead of having a flat roof, it's got a little weird hatted roof, which is probably anywhere that's not London where it rains heavily, you need to have something that allows stuff to fall off it. Here we've got a bus shelter, a London style bus shelter with a sofa sat beside it, with somebody sitting on the sofa. The AI has managed to recognise what is a bus shelter and what isn't in that complicated image. Here we've got another one with its back to the road. Here we've got one front to the road, but with the very narrow doorway. And this is in some of the wilder areas of the country. I believe up in Scotland, this is much more your standard, which is enclosed on four sides with a quite a narrow opening, so that it's a lot more windproof and weatherproof. And it's got a little hat. And then we have, and this was the one that amazed us, it was able to recognise your parish-built shelter. Your kind of parishes get to design their own bus shelters and build them in accordance with all the rest of the architecture around the place. And it was able to recognise that as a bus shelter as well. So it does very well at recognising a bus shelter. It does pretty okay at recognising a bus flag. The things that it's needing to work on is there a curb? What kind of surface there is? And some of the other street furniture is a lot trickier to spot. But one of the other things is, how do we know that it's seen the thing that it's seen? Because of the 400,000 bus stops, based on the work that we've done with, I think it's 8 local authorities now, just based on the range of stops that are determined to be trunk, we're estimating around 100,000 stops that are just within the trunk data set across the country, England, Scotland and Wales. And this includes metropolitan areas like London, Manchester and Birmingham. So how are we going to validate and verify the information that we get from that number of bus stops? We can't do it with humans. We can't have humans. Even looking at 10% of that is going to just break a team. Even if we offshored and got people with Fiverr and all of those kind of it's called mechanical turking, where you get somebody to manually do or check a software. We can't do it. It's too much. So how do we scale our work? So we've got a couple of ideas on this. There are, and I'm going to talk this one through because it's kind of a complicated, weird one, and I'd love your feedback as to whether you think it makes sense. So we have Detectron, which goes and looks at images and then labels what it sees. It's basically an image sorter or an image labeler type of AI. There is another type of AI called a visual language model that says, and it's a little like your large language model. I see this thing. I see a shape that looks like this. I know that that's a pole with a flag on top. I see a shape that looks like this. I know that that's a bus shelter. So they're two different ways of looking at an image. So what we're thinking of doing potentially, and this is, we need to go and do the proof of concept of this, is we get Detectron to look at it, and we get the other thingy to look at it, which I can never remember the name of. And then if the two of them agree, humans don't need to look at it because we've looked at it in two very, very different ways. If the two of them disagree, human needs to look at it. So it's a very, very simple, and then we can use the ones that are falling out where they disagree for us to refine their tuning. So very quick question for you all. And I know none of you are AI experts. Neither am I. I'm doing my best to conceptualize all of this. Does this make sense as an approach? Can anyone think of another way we could do this? Other than asking 148 local authorities to give me their street furniture audits, which don't exist in a lot of local authorities. I think if I get about 50 street furniture audits within the next 5 years, I will be absolutely overwhelmed with by it. Thank you, Doug. Yeah, it's kind of one of those, and this is why I'm saying we still need to do the proof of concept work. We still need to do the alpha as to whether that will work. And this is one of the things of a private beta. A lot of it is trying something and going, oh, what did we learn from that? If that didn't quite pan out, what did we learn that will change how we approach it next time? Keelan, I saw you popped off mute. Did you have a thought?
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see if it works, right? Like if you actually get figures from your testing that suggest that the two models together do better at identifying those things than one alone. I guess I'd kind of want to know a bit more about like how different they are, I suppose. Approaches.
Yeah, I think we would have to wait till the next. I'll try to do that in the next update, which will be in about 3 or 4 months' time, when we've got a little bit more, when we can bring that idea and go, this is how this one works and this is how this one works. I've had it described to me multiple times by our very, very patient tech lead, and the best I can do is one labels things and one works like a large language model, but it looks at pixels, and I'm like, okay, that's the best concepts I can do at the moment. I'm sure there's a better way of describing it, and I will be attempting to find and work that out. Brilliant, because as far as I can see, there's no other way. What that also means by having the two is it means that if one is still only 50% at recognizing curbs, and the other one's 50% of recognizing curbs, we've got a good chance of spotting the good curbs, and we're only going to have to have humans look at a small number where they don't agree, because one of the things that we're finding, I've jumped slightly, is when you're training, there's things around training. But first off, let me go and talk about pipelines. This may not sound interesting to many of you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go for it, Keelan.
Question. What are the data sources you're using for the images out of interest? Is it kind of Google Street View type stuff, or? It's
kind of Google Street View type stuff at the moment. We also got a lot of images from two local authorities who gave us their audit data for bus stops, because they had the people who did the audit also take photos. So we've got two audit sets and a whole pile of kind of using Street View and similar sets, and we're just now trying to figure out with that training data how much further can we go, and what else do we need to be able to detect this. We've also got, and I should have mentioned this in the pipeline, and I'll correct it for the one tomorrow on Thursday, we're also getting in a number of independent data sets. So Ordnance Survey is giving us a data set of what pathways exist, so what footpaths and besides the roadways and that exists. And that will give us the width and also the surface. So we won't need our AIs to go and detect whether it's grass or not, because the Ordnance Survey has that information. So what we're now needing to look at is how we get the right level of information from Ordnance Survey, because it's quite a lot, especially when you're looking across the country and we're trying to look at what's a bus stop. A bus stop is about about 10, 12 meters. It's probably longer than that, but we're looking at things. So we're trying to look at about 3 meter sections just to ensure that we get a good reading of a bus stop. If you've got 3 things or 4 things across a bus stop, that's quite a lot across the entirety of the country in terms of data if you're getting every single roadway. So we're trying to figure out just how much we need to ask for from Ordnance Survey and how we bring it in and how we map it out and match what they've got to what we've got, so we can look at a bus stop without having to look at 2 kilometers worth of data or data that's in 1 meter increments. So that's another bit of fun there. We're also we're one of the first teams in DFT to try to put AI generated data into a production system. And I noticed today there was a couple of other announcements in The Guardian around some other AI pieces from the government. We're going through a number of checks and procedures to ensure we meet the government guidelines, which is they're evolving, because AI is evolving so fast. The guidelines are evolving quite quickly. This process brought us, and I've called them technical challenges, because we needed to change a couple of pieces of technology. We'd gone in one direction, and then when it was taken to review, everyone was like, actually, that's not quite the tool that we would recommend using here, because there was licensing, there were permissioning problems, there was the way that it stored data, the security, all of those pieces. So we changed our labeling technology for labeling training data. That was quite a big chunk of work. And one of the great things of that is one of our team found a way of bringing our training data across without having to relabel it. So we'd put in a lot of effort across the entirety of the team to label like 400 and something images. And when we were told we'd have to change our technology, there was a collective groan as we realized we may need to go back and relabel 400 images. And then a day or so later, one of the team popped up and said, oh, by the way, I figured this out, and look, here's all of our labeled data in the new system. And we were like, MVP of the week, very definitely MVP of the week. We also had to change our first set of AI eyeballs. So we were using YOLO V8, which is a little bit easier to train, and slightly faster than Detectron at times, but we found Detectron was a better fit, and in the long term, its licensing fitted slightly better with how it interacted with the rest of the licenses. So we've just started to retrain and rebuild everything around moving to Detectron. But we learnt a lot from training YOLO, which we're now able to bring across and take that learning in. Because, and this moves us on to the next one, it's like training a dragon. How to Train a Dragon, very, very good movie. How to Train an AI is just as difficult. It's a massive learning curve. We are doing something that's so bespoke. We have been asking so many people, using all of our sources, all of our resources, to ask if somebody has done this and if they can come and give us a couple of hours, and nobody we can find has done the particular things that we're doing. So you want it to learn, but not memorize the data. And that is a very, very tricky balance to build. So you need to get your AI to learn what something is, but not rote learn the data. So it's more understanding the principle. And in human terms, it would be at school, some of us were taught stuff by rote learning, and we've rote learnt a lot of information, but we haven't really learnt the concepts very well sometimes. Most of my maths, for example. But what we want our AI to do is learn the concepts rather than rote learn, because that's much more applicable, and it means it's going to be able to recognize more things. We want it to be accurate, but also not use every bit of compute in the existence of humankind. So we're having to play off how many times, how accurate it is, how hard it works, versus how much money and how much, because compute is money, computers, computer power, computers, water, electricity, all of those things. So we don't want to use all of that just to raise it by a tiny percentage. We want to be balancing off the speed and the accuracy versus the sheer volume of compute there. So these things are called hyperparameters, and these are just two of them. So the team is currently working on and has done work. We've extended the amount of images we have by reversing the images and by doing various manipulations to the images. So if we started off with 400 images, by basically mirroring them all, we've suddenly got 800 images that are all labeled, but they're all labeled, they all look back to front. There is other things we've done around color shifts, move into black and white, reducing the number of pixels, increasing, all of those things have just allowed us to play around so that we get more out of the images that we've got and are able to train our system slightly better. We now know what it can see easily. Bus shelter, pole and flag. We're banging on identifying bus shelters and poles and flags. They're well in the 90% now. What it struggles with, curbs. curbs are just a nightmare. Humans struggled with curbs. Like the team would often get stuck looking at an image, trying to decide how high the curb was. So one of the things that we might do is come and have a chat to a lot of bus operators. We've got some friends with New Ventures down in BB. Where is New Ventures? I know that I've been there, but I don't know where it is.
Maidstone.
Maidstone, thank you. So we can go down to Maidstone and chat with the people at New Ventures, and look at their curbs and talk to their bus drivers about what they can drop their ramps at and not. We can go talk with other bus operators and really get a strong understanding of what curbs do what and how tight we have to be on the curb. Because if we don't want to tell somebody somewhere's accessible and the curb is so bad that it can't be used, but we also don't want to be so strict that there's almost no accessible stops, because we know that a lot of them are. So we need to find that balance. So there's going to be a little bit of work there. And then we're finding ways to avoid memorization. It's called overfitting. If you ever read about anything on AI and it talks about overfitting, it's about how much the system's memorized what you're trying to get it to do. And it's that's one of the hard things. So we're starting to find ways of avoiding that, which is about how many times we train, some of the other parameters that we give it to avoid this kind of less than great outcome. If anyone wants to give us suggestions, we are totally open to them, because training an AI really is one of the hardest things to do, especially for this type of purpose, because this isn't a generic, give it all of the internet and it will come up with something decent. This is very, very bespoke and very specific that we're trying to train, which is a lot, slightly more difficult in some ways. And then very lastly, before I open it for any questions, how are we going to plan? Because we had a plan. So we are wildly ahead of any plans that we made. I cannot describe how far ahead we are. So a year ago, if you recall, we had a wild idea of, hey, we might be able to get accessibility into NaPTAN. We've got some ideas of how to do it. And within 10 weeks, because we were supposed to have 12, but between Christmas and Easter holidays, we ended up with 10. We did a discovery and an alpha phase. So some of you were involved. We went around and asked lots of questions about what data you could get. We got a lot of data from street audits. We got a lot of information from people. We also then we used the Olympic data as a proof of concept to show that we could join the accessibility data and NaPTAN data into some kind of feed and give it to people of, here's a couple of bits of data together. So just after Easter, we embarked on a private beta. When I embarked on the private beta, our SRO, the Senior Responsible Officer, and I sat down. She's my key stakeholder. We sat down and I said, well, AI, and she was like, let's plan for April 2025. In a year's time, yes, we should be looking at AI. If you want to think about it earlier, come and have a chat. But that's about where we're thinking about it. We are so wildly ahead of that estimate, and we thought we were both being very ambitious. The team has just gone absolutely so fast on this. So just to run through, so we're going to go through what we're doing now, next, which is the next stuff we're going to do, and later. So we've got a data pipeline. We're still working on it. It's going to be refined. As we give people data, people will tell us where things are going wrong. We'll go and fix it. We'll go and tweak it. We'll go and understand what some of the queries are and where things are. We've built a little website, which is now the additional information for NaPTAN. So it's called a CMS, Content Management System. It basically means we can just throw information up on the website, me and BB, without any coding whatsoever. We can just go and do it, which is amazing. And it just makes it really easy for us to get information out. We've proven the hypothesis that trunk stops are more likely to be accessible than branch. Now, that may have seemed a very small hypothesis to prove, but it was actually quite a big piece, because it allowed us to sector out some of what we're doing, segment out what we're doing. We've also, one of the things that we're going to do is, on top of NOD, on top of the new Olympic data, we're then going to bring in the local authority audit data. And that will, we're at a stop. If you've got NOD and you've got local authority provided information will always win, because it's verifiable. They've told us what they put in. They've told us they put in a bus shelter, they put in a real-time information, and they've put in some tactile paving, and the curb is 120 centimetres high. I have no idea whether 120 centimetres is the right size. 12 centimetres high. That's probably a lot better. The curb is 12 centimetres high. Yeah, and he's trying to indicate whether or not I understand scale. So the local authority data is the data, so that will overwrite anything that comes from the NOD data. So we've set it up, and we've been able to show that we can ingest the data from a local authority, overwrite the data, and we don't have to do a lot for the pipeline. So that mechanism of ingesting any data that local authorities want to give us is there, and it's proven. So that's what we've done. We're currently we're currently creating the new Olympic core set for all ATCO codes. We're working on the AI solution. That's why there's that little red eye. And as we're building that, we're going to work with our data consumers who are journey planners to share them this data and look at how they can consume and display that up to passengers, and then what feedback they get from their passenger groups and what feedback they give us about the usability of the data feed that we give them, to then do some more. And we think there's probably going to be more than one accessibility schema while we try this out. We're going to try different ways. We're going to try different ways of telling you things, different depths, different levels of information, and it might change. We might end up with one, we might end up with a couple. We want to really get that user feedback to know what we're doing is the thing that we should be doing. And we're also adding in, we came up with a bonus. So with all of this, we've also been able to add, because it was quite important to see how people consumed and used it, not just mobility wheelchair, but also visual cane as two accessibility data, 2 bits of accessibility data within the same data set and data feed, because that is new. A lot of data that people have tried to produce at the moment has one data set. It says this stop is step free, and that's all that it says. We want to be able to say this stop is mobility wheelchair, visual cane, true. Or in some cases, it's mobility wheelchair, true, visual cane, false. There's no tactile paving. There's nothing to tell somebody that they've reached a bus stop. There's nothing. And one of the things for visual cane users that we're going to use is the presence of a bus stand, of a bus shelter, because a lot of cane users, a lot of blind users use the noise shadow of a bus shelter to ensure that they're located in the right place on the street. Apparently it's quite distinctive. I can't hear the difference, but once you know what you're listening for, it's quite distinctive. So, and weirdly enough, in providing the 2 layers of accessibility, as far as I can tell, that's a whole world-beating thing just within our data feeds of doing that. I haven't found any data feeds that are going that one level above at the detail of bus stops. Like, they'll say things like all of our stops are step free and some of our stops are visually accessible, or vice versa. They aren't going into the detail. This stop is usable by a wheelchair user and is usable by somebody who uses a cane, who's visually impaired. So we're kind of beating the world a little bit, even just with that model. And then the next bit is bringing in more of the street furniture. We've got 4 more local authorities who've given us some data to play with, and if anyone wants to give us more data, if anyone's doing a survey for the BSOG or BSIPs, of what their bus shelters are. We will give you our street furniture survey form just as a starter for 10, so you can look at what we're looking at. We're happy to consult with you on what we're putting into our data sets, what other people have given us, and just kind of give you some hints, so that we're not saying this is how to do it, we're saying this is how other people have done it. And this is the sort of information that we can get and we can use. And if you want to go more, that's fabulous. If you want to go less, we can also handle that. We've got wide varieties amongst the local authorities that we've already got in. And then we're going to publish and describe this data as best as we can. And we'll be coming to use especially a lot to kind of go, have we explained this correctly? Does this make sense to you? And then with the later, bringing in rail stations accessibility. For this, we need platforms. For this, we need an audited set of rail stations. You need an audited set of rail stations to get in all the platforms. We have actually now got a rail station audit. I ran it the other week. We now, Andy's eyebrows go up. We now know how many stations we need to bring in and bring out, and we're just working on tranching that and putting through some of the policies for that. However, we want to not do those by hand. We want to do that programmatically. So there is some changes that we need to do to how we create the rail station, create the rail data. It is still a couple of months away, Andy, but it is not. I've not been ignoring you. I know that you're crying. I'm focusing on Andy because Andy writes to me every week going, when am I going to get this? I'm sure he's just got a little bot that does it for him now, that chases me on this. We also need to bring in the metro stations. So these are your metros and your trams, looking at those. Some places this is going to be wildly easy once we've done train stations, because your metro stations are basically very much like train stations. Some places like London, this is going to be quite the data challenge. Quite the data challenge of the accessibility of every single station, especially with what's at each platform. We need to bring in ferry terminals. Can you catch this ferry terminal? Are you able to catch the ferry to and from work? Some people would like to. It's lovely to go up and down the river. And then also bringing in airport terminals. We know that there's been a lot of work by airports and by the government to focus on airport accessibility. And what we want to do is kind of hook into that, so we can describe how you can arrive on public transport and get yourself to the accessibility place. I don't know that we would need to go too much further, but it's effectively how you would do that and if that's available. On some airports, like for example London Eday Airport up in the Orkney Isles, there probably isn't a lot of accessibility because it is a field, it is a hangar in a field. It's a very, very low infrastructure airport compared to a lot of the other airports around. And that's kind of where we are. So I'm going to stop and pause breath and say, are there any questions? I'm sure you've got hundreds. We've got 45 minutes, so you can grill me as much as you like. Hopefully just on accessibility and NaPTAN, but if there's anything else you want to know about, just bear with me while I take a few minutes to find the right things. Andy, I see you flipped your headset down, so I'm assuming you've got something to say. So if you want to go first, and then we'll open it out.
Okay, Dr. J, I've got a few actually. Is it possible to get a copy of the A+ NaPTAN data so we can put it in our journey planner? Because we've got an accessible journey planner and we're working on the old Olympic data still.
So yes, if you join our private beta. So we'll get Andy, I'm just putting that in there. I'll just say Andy into private beta. We would love to give you this data to play with. So bearing in mind, this is private beta data. Like I said, the schema might change. The data's being played with. It's only going to be for, I think it's like 8 ATCO codes at the moment across the country. So it's flux and flexible. So use it for testing. Don't use it for live. That's all that I'm just going to say.
Okay.
Second
Also,
question.
what format do you want the information from the local authorities? Because I've got a lot of we got a lot of assets, shelters, curb heights, flags, and stuff like that in the NaPTAN data in Diva, so we can export those as. And I can beat my NaPTAN data owners to get more in here as well.
Don't beat them just yet, but I do like the attitude. We are taking everything as CSV or something similar, so we're also very happy to be given Excel files or anything like that. So Andy, whatever you would like. We aren't quite ready for that yet. We need to get Nod done first. So, but we know that you've got. So Andy has lots of infra. We know. Is it Joy from Hampshire?
Yeah.
Joy from Hampshire has sent us a lot of data, which I believe was from one of your systems. So she's been one of our good test proof of concept people. It's not one of the ones that we ingested, but currently, but it is one of the ones that we will be first off the taxi rank when we've finished the Nod data. But we need to focus on getting the whole country covered before we go back and clean up, or we want to get as much of the country covered, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Sweet.
lovely. That's it. That's it for me. Thank you.
Excellent, Andy. Of infra. I'm just going to put street furniture, LA data when we're ready. Might be a good 6 months, might be only a couple of months. Honestly, don't know because we need to do a lot more to figure this out. Iona. No, sorry, Justin, you're next.
Yeah, just whether either could really be part of a private beta, or really what I'm just looking for is what information points you're looking to have in that schema.
So we are looking to work in the private beta with journey planners. So we want people who are running a journey planner or something similar, because we want to see you put the data in and then work with you and the passengers to see how they're reacting to that data in the testing, how it's being used by your algorithm to plan, how it's being used by your front end to show what's accessible and what's not on a planned journey. We want to really be involved in that conversation because that will help us get the right data. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm probably at that moment, I'm probably looking at this from a slightly different perspective as well, because we want to put in our system on the stops the information related to that bus stop, so the local authorities can see what at that bus stop.
Yeah, Justin, let's have a conversation. A little bit further on, I've got mine and BB's email addresses. Send us an email and we can set up a conversation to kind of deep dive into that with you, if that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I've said Doug has audit information. I will add that down. You could send it to us, Doug, but we won't be able to use it for a good couple of months. So no stress, no rush. Iona.
Hi. Yeah, mine was probably, I mean, is going to be down the line a bit, but as you know, we're having several issues trying to get the existing data correct. So and that's great that AI can pick up all the stuff that's out there, but once we, for say you have all this stuff done in 6 months' time, but then we are adding stuff, new high access curbs, new shelters, and whatnot. I'm just thinking about our development, because we won't have development in our new system forever, whereas we do at the moment, probably, and we have time with our developers to kind of adjust what the output is from our system. And we probably should be thinking about that now, or not right this minute, but certainly in the near future, so that once we get these issues that we have just now ironed out, that maybe we can add new fields
That I totally understand, Iona, and you're in a slightly unenviable situation. Let me try and draw this out, and bearing in mind this is me trying to draw and talk and run Mural all at the same time. So bear with me if it's a little bit clunky. So what we've got, and I'll do this in yellow. So we've got NaPTAN, which is what you'll give me, and this is in an XML format. So that is a very, very specific format. XML is, I'm just going to use the word nasty. It's really hard to read. It's hard to work with. It's not the loveliest of formats.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem why I think it's quite difficult to get our developers to understand what we need and what we don't need because it is in XML.
Completely, and I totally get you. So what A+NaPTAN, I'm trying to do this and not double, because I'm looking at you and I'm not looking at what I'm doing. A+NaPTAN. This is going to be available as JSON, CSV, which is kind of JSON but dumber, and XML. So those are the outputs, but the input that you can give us for your furniture. So I'll just put LA furniture. Oh, come on, Mural, play nice. LA furniture. This will be CSV or Excel. We don't mind.
Oh, right, Excel. Okay.
Or something that's not XML. We're not expecting you to give it to us in XML.
Okay,
that's what I kind of wanted to say.
That's reassuring.
But it's a separate. These are two separate feeds. So what we're expecting somebody like Andy to do with his journey planner is he will do a join of, he'll have a NaPTAN stop information that's come from the NaPTAN file here. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. And then he will also have, on top of that, the accessibility information, which will have come from this data set here. And then both of those will present what the stop looks like to the customer or to the passenger. Does that make sense to you, Andy? Because this one here, from the NaPTAN XML to the stop information, is what you've already got. And what we're doing is we're giving you a new feed which you can join up, and we're using the ATCO code as the joiner between the two data sets, because that's the thing that every single stop has is an ATCO code. So we thought, let's not reinvent the wheel, let's use ATCO code to join this up. Does that make sense to everybody as to what the data kind of looks like? And I'll put this, so this here then goes through our system and comes out as an A+NaPTAN. Does that represent it well enough to everyone? Iona, does this make sense?
Yes, it does. The only thing is, I understand that we can send it in XML, in CSV or Excel or whatever, but I take it because it's not XML, we wouldn't necessarily be, if we don't hold all the stuff that you're able to extract via AI in our system, that once we generate our Excel file with all the stuff that we've now updated, that's not going to wipe anything that you've already got existing. Like how it works with XML, it's just going to be that kind of additional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you think of it as like a layer, there's your node layer, which is the stuff that we generate, and there might be 4 data points. You might only be able to cover 2. Does that make sense with your LA data? So the other 2, the 2 that are free and wiggling, we would still have the node data. For the ones that you've been able to cover, we've got the LA data and confirming it. So it gets quite detailed, and our business rules are something something to behold, and we are going to have to spend some time trying to document and understand them and make them as clear as possible, because all of these little edge cases are catching. Like, one of the other things that we're trying to build it is so that if you send us some LA furniture data and then you do some work and you update 12 stops, we want you to only have to send us the new 12 stops and not the entirety of your data, because that's a big CO2 waste, constantly resending us all of the data all of the time. So what we want to do is find a way for you to only be able to give us the change data. We can take it in and push the change data through, but not the rest of the data. Which, again, complications that we're trying to play with and make sure that our system's built to be robust and performative and future-proofed while we're still building like private beta. Is this really the right way to go kind of data? We might take some missteps in this. We might come up with stuff and we're like, oh, actually, we don't need that data. We might not need hard surface if we can get it from Ordnance Survey, because Ordnance Survey have it for the entirety of the country and it's updated, and we can get a feed from them if we get it the right way, that's fast, etc., etc. So there's all of this kind of extra part. Now also, we're not publishing the Ordnance Survey data to you, we're publishing an inference based on the Ordnance Survey data, which that's a nuance and a licensing nuance that BB has been helping us explain all the way across various parts, because we're not taking the data and giving you the data, we're taking the data and using it to make our data. Hopefully that makes some sense.
Yes, that does, thank you.
Sorry, I'm not sure if someone else is going to speak. I was just going to ask about the Ordnance Survey data. Do you know if that's is that like in an Ordnance Survey product that's available, or are you getting something kind of isn't more widely available? Do you know what it is? Because we've looked at, for other purposes, things like pavement width, extent of whether pavement is there or not, whether street lighting is there or not, and like there are some uncertainties in that data, I think, as well. Some of it's a bit fuzzy from the last time I looked at it. Yeah, I'm just a bit curious about that and how you're using it.
So, BB, I'm going to have a crack at this, but if I get it, if you need to step in, please feel free. So, the Ordnance Survey data that we're getting is the newest, rawest government-to-government department data, because that's one of the advantages of being the Department for Transport. The thing of that is, I know that we're getting pavement width, which I've had a look at it. I've been walked through it rather than I've had a look, because that makes it sound like I'm competent with data. I've been walked through the data very carefully, and it is what they're able to give us is very good. There is a new set of data on street lighting, which is due in March, but I don't know whether that's going out as a wider product or just to government departments. And there is another one around bus lanes, bike lanes, and pedestrian crossings, I believe, that's coming, or street crossings, that's coming later in the year. So we're working closely with the DFT liaisons to Ordnance Survey to look at what we can get as government department from this system. So Keelan, I'm really sorry, I don't know the full details. BB, do you know more about the details, or have I covered it kind of well enough?
No, you've covered it really well, Jay. And the next step is for us as a NaPTAN team to interrogate that data and see if it's good enough for us to use.
Yeah, at a visual first glance, it looks right. It's can we get it summarized down to the right detail without blowing up several servers and data pipelines and things like that, because the vastness of the data across the country at 1 meter level for every footpath is quite a lot. And yeah, so we're trying to look at how we get just the data that we need without going quite that detailed.
Yeah, okay. Great. Yeah, no, it's interesting because a lot of our use cases, we think about things like walking routes. We're thinking, for example, about things like walking routes from home to a bus stop. And so we're often looking at, I guess, yeah, when we think about new data sets, it's looking along the length of that route, I guess, whereas yours is a slightly different use case. So, but really appreciate you explaining that. Thank you.
Oh, no worries at all. And your piece of work, which is kind of like pathway, I think GTFS is called pathways or pathways. That's actually really key information, which is also why I put King's Cross and Pancras in the hard basket, because the number of pathways you can do just is crazy from each platform to each platform. Is so many, and then it's so there's different things that we want to think about when we reach that kind of big end level of doing railway stations. That's going to be really interesting. I can also give you a 5 minute. There's 2 things I could do in the next 5 minutes or the next half hour. One would be rail stations and what we're doing with rail station, which I think Andy would be quite keen to see. Just give me 2 seconds. I'll do this live and we will just hope that it doesn't go wrong. At the worst, I put in 5 minutes later. In this, I want to go to SnapTan. I want to go to my service designs and I want rail replacement bus sketches. So this is relatively hot off the press. I need to figure out how we're going to talk more about this, but this is because Andy's here and I know this, not that it's just Andy, but Andy's the person who's been chasing me for a number of train stations. So the train infrastructure, which needs to be on the 910, which is the 910 is the ATCO code for rail stations that is currently held centrally. So we want to look at all the rail stations and we need to do an audit of what currently exists, compare what's physically there, what National Rail thinks is there, what other data sources thinks is there, and what NaPTAN says is there, and get it down to here as an audit. We then want to add rail platforms in, because rail platforms exist in the schema, but we only have 3 rail platforms in our data set. If we need to do rail platforms to get in the accessibility information for rail, we need to put them in. Rail replacement bus stops need to be added. We have a little plan. I can talk you through that in a moment. This is needed for the PSV AIR regulations, and we have a deadline for October for having rail replacement bus stops in. So we are looking at doing a little pivot and kind of working in on that. The other thing that we've recognised that we will need to do, and I'm just going to say need to do, is rail station entrances exist in NaPTAN as part of each local authority. They have been put in various, and I'm just going to say 148 different ways. There are gaps, there are different rules for them, people have done them in their own way, some of them have been updated, some of them haven't. We have stations that don't have rail station entrances, we have rail station entrances with no station anymore. There is a wide variety of problems here. What we want to do is bring rail station entrances into the 910 data set, because we can use the National Rail information to put the entrances in the right place, because in many cases we've found there is only one entrance shown in NaPTAN when there are in fact 3 or 4 entrances, and those entrances are needed to map the accessible way of getting into the station, because the main rail station entrance going up the front steps doesn't help you get to the platform if you can just go around the side and use the wheelchair accessible route around the side going in the other rail station entrance. But at the moment, because there's only the one entrance, you couldn't map that out. So we've had a look and we need to do this with the data as well. So how are we going to do this? Thanks to Andy and everybody who sent us data, because we have gone through quite a bit. So we are using the National Rail API to list the in-use stations. This also, we believe, gives us a little bit of a heads up. It's not massive, might be a month or so, might be slightly less than that, of when a station is going to go live. So the moment the National Rail puts it up on their website, we will find out about it. So we don't have to go trawling all the news archives and news sources to find out about this. The moment National Rail says, hey, there's a station here, we find out. Now, this brings in a little rule that means only live on National Rail equals 910. Everything else will equal a 940 station. So this may mean some stations end up being slightly reclassified. This may impact a number of the steam rail stations that are seasonal and things like this. So Andy, I would love your thoughts on this, and we'll run a full meeting on this. We then use the CRS from the National Rail API to link to Darwin to get the tip lock and Eastings Northings, because Darwin lists not just the platforms but also all the junctions, sidings and other stuff. I'm just going to say other stuff that's there, and by using the CRS we can get just the tip lock and the Eastings Northings for the station. And this gets us all of the information that we need to build a NaPTAN in-use rail table. And using that table, we then have a little bit of magic. We can take that table and create an XML from it that will become the 910 information. So it's going to flow across. And this means that we have we can build a little automated producing the rail table and automated upload to NaPTAN. So there's a nice little flow. New station comes in, added. We may need to do a little bit of intervention in here, not sure. This is part of what we're going to play around with, uncover, and then we automate the upload. Now, I went and did an audit, and I'm just going to zoom in because this took me quite some time. I had to manually audit 3 levels of information. So 3 pieces of information. One was from the Rail Data Marketplace, one was from the National Rail API, and the other one was NaPTAN. We've found 21 rail stations we need to add. Andy's like, Andy, I think you had 15 on your last list. There's actually 21. So we've found 21 rail stations that are missing. 2,364 match. Woohoo! That's actually not bad. There's 163 we need to do something with the name updating or possible name updates. So this is where the name of the rail station across the systems is different. And we want to go through and just make sure that the name be the same all the way across. There's an interesting question. Does everything in 910 that's a rail station have to say rail station? Can it say rail star? Because if it can, we can fix up some of the spelling mistakes, what is more important, that the passenger knows it's a rail station or the passenger knows which rail station it is. So there's some interesting little questions that we want to ask around how we do the names. And then there's 160 to remove. Now, some of those 160 are dead stations and they should have gone years and years and years and years and years ago, and they're easy to take out. Some of those removed stations, a little bit more complicated, because we have 5 Clapham junctions. We want 1 Clapham junction. We have 5 Clapham junctions within NaPTAN. So what we want to do is figure out which of the 4 Clapham junctions we keep, which one we throw, or which of the 4 Clapham junctions we throw away, which one we keep. And that's going to take a little bit of time to unpick from various sources as to whether Andy and Travelline and Citymapper are all using the same Clapham junction. So which Clapham junction of the 5 is being used by people is one of the questions. So the audit will take a little bit of time to clean up. Then the first one is having an MVP for rail replacement buses. This is absolutely needed so that people can start to get everything together so they can do the planning and everything for the rail replacement buses. So we need the TOCs and the operators who do rail replacement buses to have this information. So we're going to do a bit of and I'm not going to say a bodge job, we're going to do a real MVP of, if there's a rail station, we're going to say there's a rail replacement bus in the same place as the rail station, in the same location as the railway, and we're going to suggest that they use a radius of around 200 metres So we know that for most rail replacement bus stops, they are within 200 metres of the railway, of the centre of the railway station, for most. So that's going to get us a good MVP to start with that people can use for putting in their systems, testing and planning, and starting to build up their systems. Then for the next release, we're going to find the ones where we know that rail replacement buses don't exist at that station. There's a number in the fens, there's some buses in the middle of nowhere that are nowhere near rail stations in the middle of nowhere that are nowhere near a road that don't have rail replacement buses, and we are just going to take their rail replacement buses out of the system. So that's our first level cleanup. So we know the stations that we've got rail replacement buses for are definitely the ones. Then with release 2 onwards, we're just going to play around, well, not play around, find out based on the various amounts of access of data availability. When the rail replacement bus is beyond 200 metres from the station, we're going to add it in the correct place. And I know Jonathan or somebody gave me a couple of examples of their village where the rail replacement bus stations are at different ends of the village and things like this, and quite a distance from the rail station. We'll just put those in as the correct locations and put them out. When they go to a current bus stop, what we're going to do is overlay the rail replacement bus on top of the bus stop. Now, the reason for doing this double up is so that you don't need to go and grab 2 sets of data if you're just doing rail replacement buses. You just need to grab 1 set of data and it sits on top of that bus stop. And if that bus stop moves, we'll just move it along. We'll figure out, somebody will figure out, I'll give it to our tech lead. Our tech lead will figure out if a bus stop moves, it's got a rail replacement bus on top of it. I also move the rail replacement bus stop to the same place. And then plus many other edge cases. There are edge cases to edge cases on rail replacements. There are buses that are in the middle of a parking car park that are only there when rail replacement buses run and not at other times. So we don't want buses trying to go into that car park when there are cars there because they'll get stuck. And all of those things. So there's a lot of those little things that we want to sort out. And then finally, the final iteration will be actual rail replacement bus stops at the correct location. So we've got a bit of a plan of iterating up the data, but from this very first one, from this MVP, we should have something that enables people to do their planning and their voiceovers and get that technology in while we figure out getting the data smoother and smoother and smoother. And this will all be in NaPTAN, all be available as 910 XML from NaPTAN, and we will figure out how we get that to people who want it as JSON and other file formats, because we'll be able to do that because we have the technology, we just haven't quite turned it on full time, and this will be one of the pieces that we look at that. So I'm going to take a pause there, and Jonathan, you've got a question.
Yeah, just a couple of things on this. First, a question really with my local authority hat on. Is locating these bus stops and creating the NaPTAN for them something that is going to be done by the train companies or by yourselves, or are we as local authorities going to need to get involved?
Us.
Splendid.
Us. We're gonna take the information from National Rail, and magically, I don't know how, I've got to figure it out, but we will be able to, the information exists, we just need to figure out how to parse it and how to read it from their systems.
Fair enough, and hopefully the train companies or the people who do their bus services for them will know where their buses stop, but from past experience I wouldn't absolutely bet on that. The other thing, just to drop a thought that you're probably already aware of, but just in case, will, for example, London Underground stations be part of the same data set? Because I think I said last time I used to do weekends looking after rail replacement bus services, and we did have some in bits of London where instead of the rail replacement service following the line of the normal sort of National Rail line, it would instead, we had one or two in North London where instead of the buses going all the way to King's Cross, they would go to Turnpike Lane Underground Station, which is not a National Rail station, turf people off there, and they could catch the Underground into central London rather than sitting in traffic jams
I think this comes under my plus many other edge cases, because I'm also aware London, possibly Manchester, but London be London, and is quite a different level of problem than most other places. So yeah, plus many other edge cases, I think is the bit there that we will sort out, and I will just add in here London Turnpike Lane for RRB for King's Cross.
Yeah, there must be several others like it that they do that sort of thing for.
Newbury Park for Liverpool Street is the one which I passed through several times.
Yeah.
Right, let me put that one in as well. Newbury Park for can't type. Park for RRB for Liverpool Street, which is being done up, so I'm sure Liverpool Street will be a frequent flyer for a while. So yeah, I've put that under plus many other edge cases, because I know that by the time I get down here of my 2000s, I think the correct number is around 2,500 or thereabouts. Of my 2,500, by the time I've got down to this plus many other edge cases, I should be working on edge cases that are about 10 to 20, and we've managed to get we've managed to get well over the 2,000 core stations done by the time we get down to this point, and then we've got plus many other edge cases to kind of bring in. Does that make sense, and does that help you with that, Jonathan?
Yeah, as I say, it's something that's not directly my problem now, but it was something I thought I'd better mention.
Oh, no, it's brilliant for mentioning, because I've seen rail replacement buses around London, and I know that they exist. I'm literally just putting them in the too hard many other edge cases bucket right now, because London, and I'll sort them out when I get down this far. That's probably one of my first world problems. I will have rail replacement buses for metros as well as for rail, and that's a slightly different problem again, because they're the tube rail replacements, not rail replacements.
Yeah, and you'll sometimes get Croydon Tramlink replacement buses,
which I will just
sorry.
You do it every time, Jonathan. You make me cry. Andy.
I had two. Did you? You may have mentioned it. What's the time frame for getting the missing stops into the rail data in NaPTAN? So
to get the missing stops in, we need to quickly build this little bit of the pipeline here. That is something that it's within months. I would say I'm going to say within 6, but don't hold me to it. It's not going to be much longer than that. But I don't want to give you a promise, because also I know that number is increasing all the time. Every time I have a look, there's another couple of stations coming on board. I know that it's been a problem. The issue is the audit took me about 2 days to do, to correctly line up all of the pieces of information. You can't do it programmatically because of all the spelling mistakes and all the typos and all of the other problems within the system, the NaPTAN system, not anyone else's. So I'm just like, okay, fine. This at least allows me to remove and add and see what needs to be added. We're going to focus on those two parts, and then everything else we will sort out as we go. So there will be some name changes, but I will send out a list of, we're going to change these names over the next X number of time, over the next month or something like that, just so that people are aware when names change as well. And it's a lot of, I need to decide whether we put in ampersands or the word and, because National Rail and the Rail Data Marketplace do it differently. So this is going to be probably a public meeting called, is it ampersand or is it and?
and do ampersands And how's the best way to do ampersands if we do it in XML? Yeah.
Oh yeah, don't even start. I would probably just go, let's just
The
use
other
and
one,
because it's gone a lot easier. Yep.
yeah. The other one was just a thought. You said about rail station in the name of every rail station name. We don't say bus stop in every bus stop name, so why do we need to have rail station in every rail station name? Just a thought.
Oh, this is a whole thing that I just let me find, where's my rail audit, including Network Rail. So this is my audit, and you will see that it's also not applied awesomely within NaPTAN. So the NaPTAN common name is occasionally not got rail station, but most of them do have rail station, which doesn't make sense because often, here's one that I wanted to show you. We've got Adlington, Lancashire. Did I say it right? Adlington, Lancashire, and then we've got Adlington Lancs rail station. But what's more important, the Lancashire or the rail station? Because I think the Lancashire is more important to allow Beryl and Beverly and Brenda to find the right station. They already know that it's a rail station because it'll be shown in the planner as a rail station. And I'm sure most of the time, Andy, your system suppresses the word rail station when it's displaying the 910 data. I would take a 90% guess that you suppress it. Go and have a look, because I will bet you a ride on a steam train. How's that? A ride on a steam train that that you suppress rail station on. I know it's suppressed on. I believe it's suppressed on Google. So somebody somewhere is taking out the word rail station to suppress it on Google in places, because otherwise you end up with too much. When you search for rail station, it just blips everywhere. But it's also, do we need it? Do we not need it? How do we do this? Do we just provide it and you can add it if you need it and hide it if you don't? All these questions still need to be, and this is just around sorting out these, 218 possible name changes. It's going to be one of the things to sort out.
I've just put an example in the chat, Andy, because I was checking that for something else that's not relevant to this meeting. But
so you do put in rail station.
Yep.
So that's yeah. Thank you, Jonathan.
So who owes who the ride on a steam train?
Oh, I probably owe Andy a ride on a steam train, and I want to go down and ride on a steam train. I used to get to go to Glenbrook. We used to go to see the steam trains, but we were never, going to sound poor, like I had a deprived childhood. We would go look at the steam trains, but we were never wealthy enough to go for rides on the steam trains. So one of these days I want to go and do a ride on a steam train as a day trip. So if anyone wants to suggest one that's within day trippage of London, please feel free. That's also not a miniature train, because I found a number of miniature trains in London, but they're designed for small children, and I look ridiculous on them. So we've got 7 minutes left. Let's run back to accessibility. Is there anything else that you need to ask about A+NaPTAN? And does also all of what I've talked about explain why, help you understand why bringing in rail stations accessibility is on our later list? Because there's quite some work to do before we have enough data in NaPTAN to be able to line up to do the accessibility in those spaces. Are there any other questions? Brilliant. We can finish 5 minutes early. I'm going to just show you the feedback corner. Was this update useful? If it was, what gave you joy? What was good and useful? What frustrated you? What was not good or useful? And what made you sad? What was missing? What stuff that should be happening? And then in the little blue doodad is BB's email address, my email address, and the central contact email address, which now has another person looking at it. We now have the magnificent Carla, who's joined us on the team. I will bring her along to a meeting in the future. She's just currently onboarding, who is going to be helping out with the mailbox and ensuring that emails don't get lost or put in a folder and Jay forgets about it for 6 months until somebody comes chasing. Thank you, Andy. But also it just ensures that there is more than one person looking at that mailbox, because it is it's difficult to figure out what we need to do and what we don't need to do, what are questions, what are just information. So Carla's currently just trying to sort through the mess that is there and the mess that is in the box called Jay should look at this. So I'm going to stop sharing. That's good at stop sharing. And I'm going to thank you all for your time and your attention and your thoughts and your feedback. It's amazing that you come along to a meeting for 2 hours to discuss the finer details of some of this. We can actually spend 2 hours discussing a single field in NaPTAN, because we've done that before. So I really appreciate your enthusiasm for this.
Okay, thank you. Cheers, Dr. J.
Cheers. I'm going to also remember to stop recording.
Thanks, everyone.
Stop recording. Bye.